What's going on, Steelers Nation? Y'all know what time it is. Week 6 preview coming right at you. Steelers traveling to Vegas to take on a 2-3 Raiders squad. A lot to talk about in this matchup, so I want to dive right into those things. But at the end, there are going to be a couple topics that I kind of wanted to address as well. Justin Fields, the QB1 spot, just addressing how teams are playing TJ Watt and what the Steelers can do to potentially help him out a little bit. And then maybe some thoughts on the George Pickens whole ordeal as well. So just before we get started, please make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. All that stuff is greatly appreciated on my end. And without further ado, let's look at the injury report. So, a couple big things to note. I think everybody kind of already knows a lot of the guys that are out in this one. Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig both going to miss this one. Probably going to get multiple practice squad call ups and hopes to address some of the edge depth. Sounds like it's going to be Moon as the guy that's probably going to get the start, but also like some other key injuries here. Cordero Patterson out, McCole Pruitt out, DeMarvin Leal is also out. So definitely a lot of depth pieces out. The good news was after beginning of the week, it sounded like Tomlin didn't really expect Jalen Warren to give it a go this week, but he was a full participant the last couple of days of practice. That kind of leads me to believe, even though he's questionable, that he has a pretty good chance to play. It's been a rough start to the season for Warren just because he's been dealing with some injuries. I think he was on a little bit of a pitch count early on in the season after suffering an injury right before the opener, and then of course he gets banged up, misses a couple games. They could obviously really use him. I feel like in the backfield as a runner to kind of subset some of their struggles in that regard. The running back run game has not been overly efficient. Was a little bit better last week. I really do believe that they're getting a little bit closer in that regard. I think the clean bill of health and allowing the same 5 guys to work in unison for a little bit longer will help the run game become more efficient. But I also think Warren getting back in there could potentially help them as well. One of the areas that I actually really think that he could be an asset for them is in pass protection. If you guys are members to the channel, you already know this, but I streamed for an hour and a half. I went over all of the offensive plays against the Cowboys Sunday night. And one of the things that popped up a couple times is in key situations that the running backs didn't do a very good job of pass protection, just stepping up into the A gap, taking on blockers with physicality. And that's something that you never really have to question with Warren. Like, even if he is going to lose a block, he's going to lose it 100 miles an hour. He's going to attack it with physicality. So those are just some things that I think, areas where he could help out with. But we'll see, if he ends up getting a helmet or not. I tend to believe that he will. So Russell Wilson going to be the backup this week. Sounds like per Tomlin, he's going to be active for the first time this season. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. As for Vegas, a longer list of issues on their side. It sounds like Devontae Adams, of course, not still out, pending trade request, whatever, with the hamstring. They've got some other guys. They just put Michael Mayer on the reserve list as well. He's dealing with some personal stuff. Jacoby Myers, Thayer Mumford, both of those guys are questionable. From what I understand, it sounds like both of those guys are probably going to play, but we'll see. Zamir White is also questionable, so he's kind of their starting running back, or was to start the season. So definitely Vegas dealing with a lot of injuries. The biggest news probably in recent days from a Vegas perspective is Christian Wilkins, who was playing, in my opinion, probably like a Pro Bowl to all pro type of level. Their big free agent signing from this past offseason. Season-ending injury, went on IR. I think basically to kind of give you guys, if y'all haven't really seen Wilkins play, basically he was doing the same things for Vegas this year that Cam Hayward's doing for the Steelers. He's been phenomenal against the run. I actually think that the number 1 and number 2 interior defensive lineman 3-tech guys in the NFL right now, according to most of the metrics. He's been awesome. It sucks, anytime a player like that gets hurt, does a lot to your defense. I think they really envisioned him being that 1-2 punch with Crosby. And then, of course, the other edge rusher that they've got, Malcolm Kuntz, who had a breakout season last year, he's also out. I think he's on injured reserve as well. So the Raiders are pretty banged up into this one. I do want to kind of start off by talking about just the Raiders offense, how the Steelers kind of match up with them. They're making a quarterback change. No Gardner Minshew this week. They're going to turn to Aiden O'Connell. As far as me, I don't know that actually changes anything for the game. I honestly was probably preferring that they played Minshew, just because I think he's his chaotic tendencies, I think, play into kind of the way that I think the Steelers probably would want to win this one. Minshew takes a lot of sacks. He puts the ball in harm's way, and that's really the reason behind them making the change. They've repeatedly said like they want to take better care of the ball. They don't want to force turnovers, put their defense in less than advantageous situations. This is a Raiders offense that's really struggled, as you would kind of imagine, because they've been without a lot of their key players. Like Mayer's missed several weeks. Obviously, Devontae Adams is another guy that they've been missing. Their offensive line has kind of rotated some pieces. But I mean, they still have some players over there, but like right now, they're 29th in EPA per play. In terms of like success rate, I think they're 23rd. So another thing is like they really struggle to run the ball. They're dead last in rushing EPA per play. They're dead last in rushing success rate. A lot of that is just because like with the new system that Getsy's like kind of installing, they're moving to more of a zone-based blocking scheme, and I don't necessarily know if they have the personnel to it. It looks like guys are still getting very much adjusted in that regard. I don't think that they're overly talented at running back either. But as for O'Connell, in particular, this is like a kind of a throwback pocket passer type. Doesn't have any like tools that necessarily stand out. He's not overly athletic. He's a little bit more of like a statue type of guy than a lot of the quarterbacks running around in these days. But one thing that I like about O'Connell is like he will stand and go through his progressions and he will throw with anticipation, whether it's over the middle of the field. We saw some flashes of that last season, especially like working with Adams. So also push the ball down the field a little bit more. I also think he's just a little bit more willing to play within the structure of the offense, which is probably a big reason why they're looking to make that change. So, but you can't fool him. O'Connell hasn't played a lot of ball. Like he started a handful of games last year as a rookie. This will be his first start this season. I kind of think back to I was watching some film on him from last year. They played the Vikings in a game that came down to the wire. It was 3-0, a 2-minute warning. Basically, the Vikings are trying to basically show press man coverage, and he thinks he's going to be able to work a slant off bump coverage to Devontae Adams at the top of the screen. And, his eyes go there, but then the Vikings end up popping out to what I call like two hangers. So they rotate to cover two. O'Connell just doesn't see the linebacker floating underneath the slant. He ends up throwing like basically a game sealing interception. So disguises, you can kind of bait him into some ill-advised throws, if you will. Just like I said, he's a young guy. He hasn't seen a ton. So maybe some more disguised coverages from the Steelers. And this one maybe fool him into making one of those back-breaking decisions. Some of the other guys that they got on offense, I think, are kind of the primary guys that I'd be worried about in this one. Kind of starts with Brock Bowers. He's been phenomenal. He's been their first-round pick. A little bit of a surprise that they took him in the first round. I think people are kind of understanding why that is now. Bowers, I think, leads the entire NFL among tight ends and receiving yards. He looks every bit as advertised. Like this dude already, like I think he might already be like a star level player, someone that can be like a high volume asset in a good passing game. Like that's the type of impact that he's having. Even last week against the Broncos, he made a spectacular play. They're running basically a flood concept where he's running a sail route and Minshew just throws like a complete prayer up. He's pretty well covered. He goes up and like mosses the defensive back, somehow stays on his feet afterwards, and then makes a play to turn the ball upfield and scores like I don't know, like 60-yard touchdown or something like that running away from Pat Surtain. So he's extremely good after the catch. I think he's second in the NFL in yards after the catch among tight ends too. So like that, he's a guy that you have to get on the ground. Even thinking back to like how he was at Georgia, like they like to get him a lot of design touches. Like this is a dude who's pretty dangerous with the ball in his hands. The other guy that I think I have like a lot of respect for is Jacoby Myers. Like he had a really good game against the Steelers. I think it was 2 years ago when he was in New England, if I remember correctly. He caught a lot of big third downs in that game, if I'm remembering it correctly. I think last year in the game too, like he had 9 catches. So he's a guy they're familiar with. They've played him over the past couple seasons. Myers does a lot of his damage in the middle of the field. He's really, really tough in between the numbers. He just makes a lot of tough catches, plays through contact really well, has extremely reliable hands. I didn't even look at his like drop percentage or anything like that this year, but I know like in previous seasons, he's always up there in terms of like lowest drop rate among the position. Just a really smart, tough player. Like he plays the Z. Like he's a very good complement if you have like an alpha receiver on the other side. Not overly dynamic. He doesn't do anything like spectacular or have these overwhelming tools or anything like that. He's just super reliable, man. And he blocks his tail off. So I really appreciate that about his game as well. So, like I kind of mentioned, like the offensive lines had some like rotating pieces. Colton Miller has been their longtime left tackle. I think the best player that I've seen on film from Raiders' perspective has been their right guard, Dylan Parham. Pretty good athlete, brings an element of toughness. They're starting a rookie left guard, Jackson Powers Johnson, who the Steelers had a lot of connection with throughout the draft process. Powers Johnson, really good athlete. He plays with a really high motor. Love. He's a big time finisher. But Cam Hayward been doing this a long time. He's put a lot of youngsters in a blender like that. So I would anticipate Cam having a relatively big day, just because I don't know if Powers Johnson's ready for that type of matchup. The big kind of we'll just call it weak spot for me in this one is like Watt up against their right tackle Thayer Mumford, who's questionable. DJ Glaze, their third round pick, has been filling in for him while he's been hurt. Doesn't really matter to me either way. Like this is just a colossal mismatch. I think we'll talk a little bit about Watt later in the episode, but I mean, I watched Mumford against the Ravens week 2. He gave up 2 sacks to speed on the outside track to a guy named Kyle Van Noy, who's like an edge rusher in his 30s. He's not even really like not a premier pass rusher, but he's not really like a full-time pass rusher. He's more of those like hybrid type players. So there's just no hope for this dude. Like he's going to get beat with speed. He 2-hand punches. He can't get to his landmarks in pass protection. They're going to have to give him a lot of help, and I'm sure that they will do that. But any type of one-on-one, like Watt's going to have a huge advantage. So I would be like utterly shocked if he didn't have a big impact on this game. Like I said, the Raiders dead last in rushing success rate and EPA per play. They don't have a mobile quarterback, obviously, either. Now, Minshew at least can like run around a little bit. I just don't see a path for them to be able to run the ball on the Steelers. That's just my opinion. So making them one-dimensional is going to be big. And also, I'd like to see the Steelers get off to a little bit of a faster start this week. That's something we've talked about previous weeks, but it really rings home this week as well. So those are a couple things that I would say. There are other guys that I would say like Turner is a big time. Turner and Trey Tucker, both speed guys. Trey Tucker, he's a guy who AOC had a pretty good, I think, rapport with last year. They hit some big plays. He's a deep threat. He can really, really run. So watch out for him as well. Getsy does like to push the ball down the field. That's not necessarily, I think, like O'Connell's strength. I think he's more of an intermediate passer. But they've got guys that can stretch the field for sure. Kind of moving on to the defense real quick. Patrick Graham, a lot of respect for him. He's their defensive coordinator for the last couple years. If you think about it, like the Raiders have never really had a good defense, like really for they feel like most of my life, to be completely honest with you. They're a team that just has historically really struggled on that side of the ball over the past couple of decades. But Graham, I felt like over the second half of last year, and he's kind of carried some of it into this year, really gave them stability that they have been looking for quite a long time. Like you just look at the numbers, like they're not anything overly impressive. They're 18th in EPA per play. They're 19th in success rate. This is a defense, in my opinion, that doesn't have a lot of talent, but they do have like kind of like a Rolodex of different things that they can throw at you. He's one of those guys that I think a lot of people really remember him from coming from that Patriots kind of tree. The Flores, like guys like that, the man guys that like to blitz a lot. But Graham's kind of dialed that back a little bit in recent years. He's been more of his own guy. He's done more like simulated pressures rather than just like sitting in the house and things like that. He's like more like scheme agnostic now. Like they run a little bit of everything. They don't lean into anything like overwhelmingly a lot. It's very different from like what the Steelers do on defense. Like I kind of made this comparison on the Steelers afternoon drive. The Steelers defense has a lot of talent, but you can pretty much know what they're going to do about 80% of the time. And then I feel like the Raiders, they don't have a lot of talent, especially like now that they've got some injuries up front to their front four, which is really going to be their strength of their team. Now that they got those injuries, they don't have a ton of talent, but they will do a lot of different stuff. And if you need like evidence to what like Graham can do, Graham put a hurting on Andy Reid and the Chiefs last year, Christmas Day, I think maybe week 16. They jumped out and like the Raiders won a game. O'Connell didn't complete a pass after the first quarter and they won. Like that's how good the defense was against Patrick Mahomes. I mean, like that speaks for itself. Like he's a good dude. I think Graham definitely has some tricks up his sleeve for sure. Just in terms of like personnel, the way I said that Wyatt versus Mumford was a huge advantage for the Steelers. The Raiders obviously have a huge advantage on the outside linebacker spot with Max Crosby, edge rusher. Krause's a monster, man. He can rush with his hand in the ground. He can rush from a 2-point stance. He plays with like every bit as much effort as Watt does. He's one of those like real high energy guys. He can win inside. He can win outside. He doesn't have like a ton of power, but loves like the 2-hand swipe. He can like power pop people, push guys back to the pocket. He's just a dude that never stops, and like kind of like similar to Watt. Like he's a guy who like plays the run, like doesn't take plays off, pursues heavily from the backside. He just doesn't have a lot of flaws, and he plays a ton of snaps too. Like the dude's extremely well conditioned, so he's somebody. I mean, I know that I think Smith's done a pretty good job with the pass protection this year. Has given the tackles a good amount of help, but I would anticipate a lot of help coming towards Broderick's way. I think Broderick was honestly like he wasn't great in pass protection last week, but I think he was better in pass protection than he was as a run blocker. I thought he really struggled in that regard. But this is like one of those matchups where, you just have to give him a lot of help and just try to hang on. And really the main thing is just like, don't let 98 wreck the game. Like that's kind of the guy that you have to be very cognizant of. They will move him around a little bit. Like he will do some stuff in terms of like looping around. They'll use him on stunts, and Graham has some good ways in terms of like how they scheme up some one-on-ones. Too. But without Wilkins, obviously is a huge deal there, because like those two lining up on the same side was pretty problematic for teams so far this year. Some of their other guys like Robert Spillane has been really solid for them. Like pretty sure he's like their leading tackler on the second level. Antonio Pierce has a lot of glowing things to say about how Spillane's played. It's been cool to kind of watch him go from like basically a nobody to getting a free agent deal and going to Vegas and like playing some pretty solid ball. So I'm happy for him. And of course, there's like that revenge factor. You playing your old team that didn't want you and had the opportunity to sign you in free agency. They let you walk, brought other guys in. I'm sure he's going to be jazzed up for this one. I don't know that it actually affects the game any, but I'm sure that that's going to be in his mind. One of the things I want to bring up, just some quick hitters on their secondary. Trayvon Merrick, he's more of their like post safety, really good ball skills, a dude who always seems to find himself around the football. Their other corners, they are young guys. They're playing Jacorian Bennett. He's like a mid-round pick, I think, a year or two ago. The dude can really run, and they've trusted him on an island out on the perimeter. Like he can really run. He did get dunked on a couple times last week. Cortland Sutton got him on a back shoulder fade. It's worth noting that both of their corners are really short, so that always leads me to believe that they're kind of smaller, thinner guys. I think that Pickens could have a back shoulder or two when they get those middle field closed looks whenever Fields wants to take them. And then their other corner is Jack Jones. He was a guy who was in. He was in New England for a little bit. They released him because of some trouble he got in. He's kind of found a home with Vegas. He kind of got started. He kind of got inserted into the starting lineup, I think, sometime last year. He took over for Marcus Peters. What's really funny about Jones taking over for Peters, in my opinion, is when I watch Jones on tape, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Peters, just from like being up against him for so long in Baltimore. Peters was always a guy who like you had to be really wary of like where you were putting the ball around him, because he was a playmaker. Like he would give up some plays. You could definitely pick on him from time to time. Wasn't the best man coverage player, but he was very opportunistic, and that's pretty much how Jack Jones is. He's already picked six Aaron Rodgers. He's picked six Patrick Mahomes. You just have to be extremely careful. Like if you were throwing flat routes or anything to the perimeter under like 8-10 yards, this dude's going to try to jump it. He's going to try to take it to the house. He's done it. Like he will continue to do it. He's very aggressive. Now it does have some like drawbacks, because he will jump stuff to the flat like prematurely. So you can kind of get them on some blood concepts and throw the ball and kind of high low him, because he's a pretty easy player to read. He's pretty much always going to be trying to come downhill. The other thing about this Raiders defense is they've had some issues with some motion and defending stacks. So like that's something that I would look at. Last 2 weeks they've had a coverage bust on the outside that's led to what should have been a deep ball touchdown last week. Troy Franklin dropped one in the end zone. And then the other thing, the Raiders this is one of the worst tackling teams I think I've ever seen. Like it's atrocious. I had to look up the numbers after I got like 2 games deep into their film, and they're leading the NFL in missed tackles according to Pro Football Reference. I mean, you just look at some of these numbers, like guys, it's bad. Like their corners, Jacorian Bennett, 58% missed tackle rate. Like a bad missed tackle rate for a corner is like anything above like 15 to 20. 58 missed tackles. He's missed 58% missed tackle rate. He's missed 7 tackles already this season. And it's not like he's not the only one either. Like you go down the list, Marcus Epps, their other safety, 25.9. He's got 7 missed tackles. Jack Jones, their other corner, 21.4. He's got 6 missed tackles. Another thing about Jones is like he don't want to tackle. So like that's the other thing about starting fast against this team. Of course, everybody's like seen the headlines. Like Pierce came out and said, "Hey, like we saw some guys making business decisions when they got down and stuff like that." This team, like if you jump on them, they will quit. Like I really do believe that. I think there's certain guys on this team that just don't really like to tackle, and they've clearly been a little bit frustrated. I think with some of the turnovers and some of the positions that they've been put in because of those turnovers. But like if you get up on them, you can kind of wear them down a little bit to the point where I just feel like, it's a huge advantage. Even a guy like Nate Hobbs, who I didn't mention was their nickel corner. I think he's always been regarded as like one of the better like run defending nickels. A guy who really tough, has some limitations, I think, but really tough. Like he's even at a 20.8% missed tackle rate. So, I mean, pretty much everybody except Bob Spillane ain't tackling nearly well enough in space. The Broncos chipped at it a little bit last week with some screens and just getting the ball out of Nix's hands quick. It's just rough. Like that would be, I think this could potentially be a really nice game for Pat Freiermuth, especially because of their tackling woes, and I think he's kind of the best player that the Steelers have in terms of after the catch. Some of the other stuff that Graham will do, like I said, he's pretty scheme agnostic. He'll do some different things from a coverage perspective. He is pretty good about like when he wants to dial up pressure. I think like his pressure pass are pretty good. I would expect without Wilkins and without Kuntz, I think they're going to try to, if I had to guess how they're going to play Fields, I think they're going to try to blitz a little bit more, do some sims, do some cover one stuff. They have some like cover zero stuff that's kind of unique too. One of the examples I tweeted out yesterday is they're basically running in a jet front. So a jet front is just like two wide nines and 2 3 techs, and then they're bringing like a double edge pressure. So the double edge pressure, they're in 6-man protection. So it pretty much guarantees you that you're going to get a free runner for the most part. And then they drop a bonus guy out. So they end up with 6 blockers against 5 rushers, and they're still able to get a free rusher at Watson. They hit him as he throws. It's incomplete. They get off the field on 3rd down. So it's like he knows when to turn the dials, and like he has that stuff like in his bag. It just depends on like how he wants to play the Steelers. Just a couple things I want to hit on like before I kind of wrap this thing up. I'm sure there's like other stuff I've missed just because, like I said, I think I've watched just about every game of the Raiders this season now. But in terms of like Justin Fields, I know like a lot of people are asking or wondering like if he's going to keep the job, what's going to happen after this week. I think the thing with Fields, man, just go out there, play your game, and take what the defense gives you and execute the offense. I didn't feel like he did a really great job of that last weekend against the Cowboys. Of course, I went over every single play, so you can go back and watch that if that's something you're interested in. But there was just a couple turn downs that I just wasn't really like overly thrilled with. He missed a deep crossing route to Calvin Austin that should have been an explosive playoff play action. Of course, they didn't hook up on like that first pass of the game or whatever to Connor Hayward. It hits him in the hands. It's definitely a catchable ball. I think he could have made it a little bit easier on him. And then there was just like a couple times on 3rd down where I just felt like he was getting a little frazzled by some of the pressure and just missing some guys. I thought Pat Freiermuth was open a lot on 3rd down last week. So please throw the ball to 88. Like he's been open. Just get it to him. That's all I ask. But in terms of Fields, I mean, there's nothing he can do other than just go out. Like I mentioned this as like a thing earlier yesterday or whatever on the afternoon drive, but there's things that are out of your control as a quarterback. Like Justin Fields can't control who his wide receiver 2 is and why he can't get any separation on the outside. That just is what it is, right? He can't control the effort level of George Pickens. But what he can control is like you can go out there and execute the offense. When throws are available to you, you just make them. And if he goes out there and he plays within the offense, he executes the offense, makes the throws that are there, gets the ball out on time, takes care of the football, they win the game. He exits this weekend 4-2 as a starter, force the team into making a difficult decision. If the Steelers come out of this one and they say like, hey, like I think we may have like a higher upside, or we think we could get more out of Russell Wilson, then that's the decision that they make, right? But all you can worry about is just playing well this weekend, and we'll see how he responds to it. Like I said, Justin's a really tough kid physically and mentally, so I don't think he's going to be like overly worried about looking over his shoulder because Russ is going to be active or anything like that. But I'm excited to see how he plays. This week's a big opportunity for him, probably the biggest, like maybe the biggest game of his career, just because it could define if whether or not he keeps his job. So um, we'll see what that looks like. But some of the stuff I wanted to get to with TJ, seen a lot of stuff. You guys have all seen like the graphs and stuff that are coming out from Pro Football Focus. They're tracking this new stat. It's called like chipped rate. It's just basically a percentage of like how often edge rushers are getting chip blocked. Well, TJ's at 36%. The next closest is Myles Garrett at 23%. Now, I want to preface this because like I know somebody in the comments will say it if I don't. There are advantages when an offense is willingly saying like, hey, we're going to keep an extra tight end to block this edge rusher. And I understand like not being able to get five guys out in the pattern is a win for the defense. So it does have like, there are positive effects that could come from that. However, with that being said, I just don't think the Steelers have done a good enough job putting him into enough advantageous situations and getting him away from those chips. Like I almost feel like they're just allowing offenses by being like super predictable. They're allowing offenses to kind of dictate the matchup to them and take him out of certain plays. And by making him like effectively rush twice, like, hey, you're going to have to beat this tight end on the chip. Then you're going to have to go beat the right tackle on your way to the quarterback. And oh, yeah, you got to do that in 2.7 seconds. Like it's a tough life to live. Like those are very difficult assignments for an edge rusher. TJ is a great player. I also will acknowledge that TJ has a very specific way that he wants to play. Like he's a guy who is a high side rusher. He's an outside track guy. He doesn't use a lot of moves. He wants to play on the left side of the defense. They don't move him around a lot because of that. I get that. That makes it more predictable for the offense to know where he's at. All those things are true. Okay. I totally get all those things. However, there are things that we could do to make his life easier. For example, I will give you guys an example from the Steelers Browns game last year. I think it was the second game. The Steelers typically have chipped Myles Garrett a lot in their matchups, right? They don't leave Dan Moore one-on-one because they're not stupid. That's what you do to elite pass rushers, right? So last year in the game, they had Najee Harris go out there and basically he's in a tight end alignment, and he's about to go out there and he's about to hit Harris or hit Garrett. What do the Browns do? They blitz the back. So they just blitz Harris. So he's forced to block a linebacker, and then they get a one-on-one for Garrett on Moore. Garrett, of course, wins pretty much instantly, brings Pickett down for a sack. Okay, so like that's one of the things that the Steelers are going to have to start doing. They're playing cover 3 at like 54% rate right now. That's just astronomical. Like it's so predictable. And the reason why they're doing that, I think, is just because I think that they just understand that a lot of the teams that they've played so far this season, because of the quarterback play, different things, they've just been more talented and they're just trying to win with 4. And there's always advantages. Like, yes, if you can get home with 4, that's great. But other teams have adjusted in the way that they're playing the Steelers. They're trying to take number 90 out of the game. They're going to continue to do that, especially until like other guys start stepping up and beating them. And it's kind of hard to do that when Highsmith and Herbig are both out. Now, some of the other ways that you can do it, okay? One of the things that I think like you're going to have to probably get some buy-in from TJ on, but you're going to have to run him on more stunts. Like that's the other thing. So for example, if he's in a wide 9 alignment and you see that you're going to get a chip, like if you start noticing like, hey, I've gotten chipped the first 2 third and long or third and passing situations, whatever that we've been in. One way that you can do that, put 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, okay? Have a linebacker basically shade and like a one technique away from him. Grab the center. What I mean by grab the center is like take a step forward, put your hand out, act like you're rushing, and then drop to like a zone alignment if you want to be in some type of zone pressure. Okay. On the other side, that will get the center to turn to the left if they're in like 5 or 6 man protection, more than likely. And then you can have the defensive tackle, which is usually like Ogunjobi. You can have him slant towards Watt. Ogunjobi's a dude who has a pretty fast first step. So like that's one of the things he likes to do, likes to get upfield, have him slant left, bring TJ around. I know this because I just watched Max Crosby do this like multiple times already this season, and he's gotten pressures off it. So it's not, there are things that you can do. And even if you want to get crazy, like if you don't, like if you want to get him an even better looks, align some type of safety or some type of linebacker if you want to blitz those guys over the C gap, bump him out past the chip tight end, and then just blitz off that side off an overload, and you can get a one-on-one with TJ on the tight end. So there's ways to do it. You just got to be a little bit more creative. Like them just rolling the ball out on all these different rushes, and they're just saying like, all right, we're gonna roll with 2 9s, 2 3s, and we're gonna have TJ like go 1-on-2 against a right tackle and a tight end. Like it's so predictable. You know exactly where he's at. You know exactly what he's gonna do, and the offense like has a better understanding of how to take it away. And there's, you know, it's not that TJ hasn't been a factor. Like he's still having a really good season. I think he's got like 4 or 5 sacks or something like that. But he's only got 14 pressures. Like he's tied for 29th among edge rushers right now in pressures. That should never happen. TJ's not any like he's not any worse than he was last year. Like he's still a dominant player. It's just you got to give him more chances to play. And I understand that there's drawbacks to like an offense does lose some of its luster when you have to dedicate 2 guys to one player. But the offense is like that they're facing, they're willing to take that trade off because they're like, okay, we're not going to let number 90 just completely wreck the game and ruin it by himself. So as a defensive coordinator, you got to adjust. The TA is a smart dude. He's a lot smarter than I am. That's why he's the defensive coordinator of the Steelers. I just think that there are better ways to do it than what the Steelers are doing right now, and that don't even involve him needing to move around and play over the A gap like Michael Parsons or play both sides of the formation. Like you don't even have to do that. You just got to be a little bit more creative about your blitzes, your stunts, and different ways to take up blockers and get him one-on-one. So, but that's a rant that I've been wanting to get off my chest because I've seen that stat thrown around so much over the past 2 weeks, and there's been a lot of discourse. People ask me about it, so I wanted to kind of get a long explanation there. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll tweet out some clips probably later before the game as well, just of like this kind of some of the examples I'm talking about. But then the last thing about Pickens, I don't really know what it's going to look like moving forward, whatever. Like is the snap count going to stay the same? Over the first like 4 weeks of the season, I tweeted this one out, but they ran 40 pass plays out of 2 wide receiver sets. He ran 34 routes on those plays last week. They ran 8 pass plays out of 2 wide receiver sets. He wasn't on the field for any of them. So the load management, whatever, benching, like whatever you want to say, like obviously Tomlin acknowledged that the effort that he's putting in is a factor in terms of like determining just how much he plays. Is it going to change? I don't know. I think Pickens, like, I think he is probably going to have a good game against the Raiders. They don't have anyone that I think can cover him one-on-one. As long as he's engaged, like, it should be a pretty big day for him, to be honest with you. But, I think anyone guessing about like what's going to transpire with him, like the rest of the season or moving forward, would just be like, it's just a pure guessing game. Like it's really going to be up to him and like um, how much he really wants to put forth. The Steelers obviously need him. They've got some issues at wide receiver aside from him, but this was one of those situations where like they were like I wrote about it before the season started. Like I thought that he was their most important player. Like I think that the Steelers could get competent quarterback play from either guy that they chose to start the season or needed to play. I don't know how this offense was going to function without a good, like the best version of George Pickens. And I don't think we've got the best version. We definitely didn't get it last weekend. I think that he knows that as well. And they need it going forward if things are going to improve. And, because that was a banged up Dallas defense. They should have moved the ball more than what they did. It was a really disappointing performance from the offense as a whole, I thought. So hopefully better things are ahead. I'm not going to hold my breath that things are necessarily going to change drastically. But I would love to be proven wrong about that as well. Hopefully things get straightened away. I think the easiest thing to say is like, hey, like, feed him touches, getting the ball earlier in games, like try to keep him engaged. I think that's like the common sense approach. And yes, they should be trying to get the ball to their best player 100%. So I agree with all those things. Now, sometimes the ball doesn't go your way and, then you're kind of back to square one, whatever. But yeah, the best thing probably to do this weekend would be feed him the ball, let him go off, get him back on the moving train, and then we can hopefully move on at least for the short term. So I appreciate you guys watching. I know I've been trying to go like lighter on these videos, not keep them as long. But I had a lot to say this week. Watched a lot of tape. Had some takes I wanted to get off. So definitely let me know about like your score predictions, like what y'all see the game as, like any type of like player prediction, score prediction, anything that y'all want to drop in the comments. Be sure to do so. I will be back. So the game is on at 4 on Sunday. 50-50 on a Sunday night recap. If not, like early Monday morning, we will see. Kind of just depends on how the game goes, too, probably. But we'll see on that. I'll definitely keep you guys posted, and then we'll be on like our normal schedule, 1 to 2 film rooms next week, and then we'll just keep on rolling. So I appreciate everybody's support. Just as a reminder, please make sure that you check out the our channel sponsor, Homage. Got a lot of cool t-shirt designs coming out that I'm really excited about. You guys are going to really like. Just use the link in the description if you're going to go look for yourself some new Steelers gear. And then as always, if you want like more detailed like X's and O's content, stuff like that, please make sure, check out the membership opportunity on the channel. Like I said, stream for an hour and a half. You guys can go back and watch that live stream if you would like. If you need something to do to, you know, spend some time or anything like that before the game, that's definitely a good way to do it. So, like I said, I will see you guys either Sunday night or early Monday morning. Peace and love.